St. Louis, 1949. There was a clear need for new housing in St. Louis. Like many other large industrial cities, the turn of the 20th century was marked by atrocious living conditions. Roughly 85,000 families lived in 19th century tenements. It was a time of a new economy, spurred by the post-World War II economic boom, coupled with Truman's passage of the Housing Act of 1949 that allocated funds for 810,000 public housing units throughout the United States. It was the beginning of the Age of Plenty. Returning servicemen and their families were fleeing to the developing suburbs, leaving both low-income black and white families in the blighted urban ring. In St. Louis, there was a push to redevelop this inner ring, and the answer was the ambitious Pruitt Igoe public housing project. Modernist ideals drove the Corbusian ambition to build the biggest large-scale public housing venture to date. Joseph Darst ran for mayor the same year as the passage of the Housing Act on a platform of urban renewal and slum clearance. He had seen New York's high-rise public housing projects and declared that children given the opportunity of residing under healthful community conditions and rescued from the squalor of slums will have greater physical, spiritual, and economic strength to carry on the traditions of democracy. Architect Minoru Yamasaki was commissioned to design this ambitious endeavor. He and his colleagues were known as Romantic Modernists, driven by architectural idealism to correct the tragedies of slum life. He designed 33 11-story modernist apartment buildings comprising 2,870 units. The construction began in 1952, and problems became instantly apparent. The designers went over budget, and a material shortage caused crucial facilities to be built inadequately. They were completed, however shoddily, in 1955. The exuberance of completion was short-lived. Upon arrival, residents were greeted by subpar craftsmanship and failed elevators. Pruitt Igoe was designed for both white and black deserving poor, but who still kept jobs. None of the buildings were designed to end segregation, and initially, buildings were segregated by race. Later, they were integrated, but whites began to move out, leaving mostly black, female-headed households behind. The Pruitt Igoe demographics in 1965 showed that 2/3 of residents were minors, and that only 38% of units contained a single employed resident. There was an ever-present danger of crime and vandalism in public spaces in the buildings that added insult to injury to the quickly deteriorating buildings.
From the rock of the ark to the fading day of our star, the light races, the light tracks, the moon rises, the moon sags over the rolling waves, and your hands on the balcony.
The elevators quit working entirely. Broken windows and poor ventilation marked the infrastructural decay. Renters, furious that the buildings were nearly uninhabitable, staged a 9-month rent strike in 1969. Occupancy dwindled to 65% in 1970, and 1972 marked the demolition of the first building.
Flies apart, turn your bow to the biggest wave.
Igoe became synonymous with public housing failure. Postmodern architecture critic Charles Jenks called the demolition of Pruitt Igoe the day modern architecture died, and many point to its modernist design as the sole culprit. Modernism itself is the idea that man can rationalize himself out of any problem using science and technology, and Pruitt Igoe's inspiration and purpose were developed in a modernist context. But this argument fails to recognize the financial, political, and sociocultural inequality that also led to Pruitt Igoe's failure. St. Louis's declining tax base left little public money to maintain the poorly built structures. Popular critiques take the blame off of society's larger race and equity issues and put it squarely on the shoulders of the designers like Yamasaki, who would later go on to design another famous modernist structure, the World Trade Center's Twin Towers. Referring to Pruitt Igoe, he said, "It's a job I wish I hadn't done." Today, the 57 acres of the Pruitt Igoe site remains vacant and overgrown. Nature has retaken the site of man's modernist social housing experiment. It is unquestionable that Pruitt Igoe was a multifaceted failure of modernist thinking and the paternalistic style of planning of the post-New Deal era. Government intervention was in vogue, but the way in which it was implemented was far-sighted and ignored the people who the project was designed to serve. There are, however, signs of hope. A science and math magnet school has been erected on the southernmost corner of the site. New urbanism-inspired low-density housing has been developed just east of the site, and there has even been recent rehabilitation of nearby historic structures. New ideas about planning theory and public facilitation techniques have the opportunity to correct the mistakes that occurred at Pruitt Igoe if planners act in a way that also exemplifies what planners profess.